Good. I'm Bonnie Blake, and it was really close. My title is Program Director. The program is the Master of Arts in Graphic Communications, Management, and Technology. It's a program that started in 1982 to help train managers for the next generation of what was then the printing industry. Well, we've all evolved, and the media and communication industry, as everyone in this room knows, is changing by the second. So we are so proud today to have students from our program, alumni, and other members of the NYU community with us today as the guests of MediaPost. So on behalf of the students, the Dean's Office, alumni, and our board, and our wonderful career development folks in the back, raise your hands. There you go. Welcome to NYU SCPS. Our school is known for continuing education, and in a sense, that term continuing education continues to mean that people who are lifelong learners will continue to succeed in careers and in their personal life. So the school has a variety of continuing ed courses. They have many graduate programs. Many are related to this program, and they have a special undergraduate program in the McGee division. So if you've got any questions about the school, about a course, about a direction, please speak with someone from NYU today. Now, in the back, Rachel is there, Jeannie, and they're happy to talk to any employers in the room if you're interested in interns and students for future projects. So right now, I want to go back to Ken. Thank you so much for coming. If you need anything, just ask. And have a great event. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. And just to announce this now, after the forum, which will end more or less around 10:30, there is going to be a reception here hosted by NYU SCPS, graduate program in graphic arts communication, or something like that. Very close. And Bonnie, so please stay after the program with us. And some of the speakers are going to be able to hang around too, so that's great. They'll get a chance perhaps to meet them. So without further ado, as they say, I'm going to introduce Editor-in-Chief of MediaPost, Joe Mandisi. Anybody who cares at all about the world of media ought to know who Joe Mandisi is. And I don't say that just because he is the Editor-in-Chief of MediaPost Publications, but he's got a long and distinguished career in media industry journalism, including Advertising Age, Adweek, before, and some other publications, some of which aren't around anymore. And but for MediaPost for the last 10 years, we've appreciated his leadership, and Joe is going to introduce the panel.
Okay, well, thank you for being here, and thank you, NYU, for having us back. I think it's great that we've moved into an academic environment for this discussion, because I always have felt that there hasn't been enough integration between the worlds of commerce and industry and academia. There's some great examples in our industry where that happens, and I think it's great that NYU is doing this, because I think of New York as being media town. I grew up here, it's my town, but you know, obviously geographies are really important, and I'd like to see more of an academic integration with the future of media. So I was one of the people who was a naysayer that we could do this every year, although we do have kind of the subhead on the title of this conference called The Future of Media, It's Not What It Used to Be. And I think the thing is that it does change every year, and the biggest change in terms of the future is speed. And I think the speed of change just keeps accelerating. And it's impacted business models, educational models, commerce models, and especially the most important of all, the consumer and how they experience and interact with content, brands, and everything we've been discussing this week at Advertising Week. So you can read about a lot of how we think about that in our magazine. This showcase here is for industry stakeholders to talk about how they see it going. The idea is we would assemble a mix of important people who are actually influencing the future, and you know who they all are, but I'm going to introduce them briefly for you. And then Julia Borstein, our esteemed moderator, will actually probe them. So our first speaker to my left and to your right will be David Fisher, who is Vice President Business and Marketing Partnerships at Facebook, which is actually a pretty lofty role. I'm not sure how he fits into the org chart, but he's probably like number 3, because he's the guy responsible for money, basically monetizing that billion user platform. And as you all know, given what I just said about change and the speed of change, I'm looking forward to hearing what David has to say. Our next speaker is going to be Eric Hirschberg, who's CEO of Activision. And before that, he was CEO of Deutsch, a big advertising agency owned by Interpublic Group, and an important player in the discussion. One thing I didn't say is the reason I think we have a heavy emphasis on advertising folks here is, the fundamental business models for supporting media, there are only really 3 ways to pay for media. I pay, you pay, or someone else pays. And historically, advertising has underwritten most of the media content that people get. I think gaming and game platforms is a really integral part of the future, not just in terms of it being a distinct platform, but in the way it's influencing the way consumers and content publishers interact with all media. The concepts of game mechanics and gamification are going to infuse the way people do everything with media. Next, we have Arianna Huffington, and that's the obligatory introduction that doesn't need an introduction. But clearly, when I talk about the speed of change, I can't think of a better poster child than the Huffington Post. It's really impacted every journalism model I can think of, and the business models related to that. Next, we have David Kenny, who is currently the chairman and CEO of the Weather Channel. But I think of him as being an agent of change. He started by creating what I think is really the first big, significant digital advertising agency in the world, Digitas, which is now part of Publicis. Before he left, he had been running VivaKey, which is their centralized media and digital agency holding unit within Publicis. He's always seen the future faster and quicker than anybody I can think of that I've been able to meet with and talk about. And then in the interim, he was running Akamai, which I don't know if all of you folks in the room know, but this thing called the cloud, basically Akamai powers it. They distribute servers around the world. And when I talk about the speed of change, servers and computers and cloud are really integral to all that, because all the abilities to transmit megabits of data per second, well, Akamai was doing it. So David brings that experience coming into the Weather Channel too. Next, we have Nigel Morris, who is CEO of Aegis Media Americas and EMEA. And basically, he is the guy who is overseeing all of the media operations for one of the largest media agency holding companies in the world. They are about to merge with one of the biggest in Asia, Dentsu, to form probably the first truly, global integrated agency holding company. Next up, we have Miles Nadal, who is CEO of MDC Partners. And it looks like we have a little bit of a Madison Avenue bias, but they bring very different points of view. MDC Partners is a unique agency holding company that's been acquiring agencies for some time, but has a unique philosophy of letting them, the owner-operators, kind of run their own shows. But more recently, has been acquiring a lot of media assets. And I'm looking forward to hearing what he sees in the future of media. And last, we have Tony Pace, who's the CMO of Subway Franchise World Headquarters. He also was named one of our digital all-stars last night at our OMA Awards. And I'd like to thank him for being here. He has a very unique view of the role that digital media in particular have for advertising and brands. So on that note, I'd like to introduce our moderator. Julia Borston is a media and entertainment reporter for CNBC. She's the preeminent journalist covering the intersection of Wall Street and media. And if you just saw some of the interviews she's had this last couple of weeks, Dick Costello from Twitter, Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook, she gets access to the real heavy hitters, and we're going to hear her probe a few of them right now. So thank you, Julia.
Thank you. Well, that was quite an introduction. We obviously have a really diverse, exciting panel. So I think we should get right to it. We have so many perspectives across media and content and advertising and distribution and social and gaming that I feel like the big question here is sort of, what is the future of media? This is the big, $100 billion question or $100 billion question, however we want to think about it. And I guess I wanted to start off by having everyone just give their thoughts on the one thing that they think is going to be the biggest change in the future that they're thinking about in the way they run their businesses today. So if each of you want to just give one quick thought, whether it's mobile or transition to new devices, what's the one thing you're thinking about as you run your business?
I think the thing from my perspective is the way that, and wouldn't be surprised to hear it, from my perspective, it's the way that people connect, engage, and share information. Because I think, in a world, in a panel in which we have a lot of people thinking about what's going to happen and making predictions, some of which will come true, some won't, I think a couple of things we can agree on is, one, we're all going to continue to have the constraint of not enough time in our life, and no one's going to be able to create and make the days longer for us. So we're constrained to 24 hours of time. And we also know that the amount of content that will be created is only going to continue to go through the sort of exponential growth that we've seen. So, the smartphones in our pockets not only are this incredible computing platform, but then the photos, the videos. I can see a bunch of you guys on it. If you're not paying attention, I hope you're on Facebook. But what that means is, so the question is, we have a limited amount of time. We have more and more content being created. How are you going to find that? And we think it's going to be through people, and that basically the types of information, how you access information, what's relevant to you, is all going to be determined by relationships, by connections to other people, by connections to businesses, by connections to brands, connections to publications, and so on. And we're starting to see that. We have people like Ariana in the Huffington Post is one of the leading examples, and we think that's just but an indicator of what's to come in all sorts of industries.
Before we move on, I should say we are going to be opening up for questions at the end, so start thinking about questions. And also, speaking of Facebook, please post a Facebook tweet. I hope the panelists make lots of news today, so you'll have a lot of things to post and tweet about. Eric, what's the big change you're watching out for?
Well, obviously, most forms of entertainment have gone through a digitization, and that process has not been great for a lot of those industries, whether that's the music industry, the film industry has gone through it more recently. Certainly, journalism has been majorly disrupted, and the bandwidth and the speed at which the pipe can bring media to people has gotten to the point where games are starting to go through that process. Up until very recently, the files have just been too large, and so obviously navigating that transition is top of mind for everybody in the gaming industry right now, and making sure that you navigate it without value destruction. And there's the other thing that's happening is that because of the proliferation primarily of smartphones, but also things like Facebook, people are gaming on new devices and in new times of day and in new demographics more than ever before. And there's an opportunity to kind of convert those people into gaming enthusiasts and to turn gaming into the mainstream entertainment that I think it's become, and really amplify that.
I really think that there are two big trends. One you already talked about, which is the trend towards engagement and sharing and appealing to people's hearts and imaginations and emotions, not just their minds. I think that's going to only accelerate as more and more people are coming online. But I think the other trend, which is just beginning to be obvious and which we are obsessed with at the Huffington Post, is the trend to disconnect from technology in order to connect with ourselves. I think more and more people, and I know that's paradoxical, coming from the Huffington Post, but I think in a way brands that can look at what's around the corner and tap into the zeitgeist before it's obvious are going to really be at a huge advantage. And so we are working at the moment with all our lifestyle sections, which include an entire section dedicated to sleep, one of our most popular sections, but all our other sections, divorce, weddings, teen, the emphasis, the editorial priorities, how to do all these things with less stress. I think as you look around, those of you who have young children see that they are more and more addicted to technology, to the point where it's affecting their relationships, it's affecting their sleep, it's affecting their capacity to learn. So if we can be ahead of addressing these problems in a way which is going to be exciting for our readers, I think it's going to be a huge advantage. That, and of course doing it all in real time, but also learning how to disconnect from real time.
Yeah, I agree. We're seeing the same thing. People are using weather to plan. And so the primary use case, and the biggest use case is actually on the weekends, when people use the weather to then figure out what they're going to do, and they're exploring a lot of other places. So I do think people are looking for ways to disconnect. And you need to have the media go with them. I would say the other thing that we're focused on is, and it's segmented, the mix between authority and community in media. Media's long had authority in our category. That really mattered. So Weather Channel is known for the best weather, and that's what people came to, and they want that authority. But we have this other brand, Weather Underground, which is just booming. And there are 25,000 people who wrote checks, their own money, $2,000 to put a weather station in their backyard and send us the weather every 2.5 seconds. Some people can't, 11 million people use this site, it's got great data. And then the people who couldn't afford to invest in a weather station submit photographs, so there's 1 million photographs that are submitted. It's very loyal. They have conventions of people who use Weather Underground. And I just look at that phenomenon and say there's increasing room for crowdsourcing, and there's increasing room for community to take some part of media.
I'm going to sort of pick up on almost all those comments, because we sit and have a sort of transversal view, because our job is to advise our clients who have brands into how to connect with those consumers in amongst all of this change that's happening. And I guess as we think of our business, I think of it on the supply side and the demand side. And on the supply side, what we're faced with is this atomization of media, the explosion of the amount of choice that a brand has, almost out of kilter with that brand's ability to actually deal with it. And what we're going to see, and what we are gearing up for, is a marketplace for media, which is going to become much more automated. It's going to become much more real time. Data is going to become absolutely critical to the way that we are able to take decisions to advise our clients how they spend their money. But on the other hand, it is fundamentally still all about people. And one of the things I think is really important is the understanding of people and how people are changing in this world, because it's not now just about their intrinsic motivations, it's about their extrinsic ones, about how they're connected, how they make decisions, which Arianna and David are just talking about, which is, we're increasingly influenced by the people we're connected to and these little microcultures that we're part of. And so for us, we're gearing up for automation, data, and all those things, but at the same time, it's about really understanding people and running a people business like Mars. It's how in that world, again, do we attract talent? How do we keep our talent forward-thinking, motivated, and able to keep up with the massive amount of change that's going on?
I guess as we go along, everybody keeps adding on to everybody else's. So it's good to be toward the end, especially if you are not capable of an original thought and you're a plagiarizer. It gives you a lot of material. So I guess, the things that we think about are, firstly, how do you monetize interaction? How do you monetize viewership? I think it's a big challenge that, all organizations face. I think the role that we play, we think of ourselves as an insurgent organization, is how do you drive sustainable, profitable growth of your client's business in a way that you are using creativity, technology and innovation to make brands resonate more in consumers' minds, build that emotional connection, but ultimately, how do you drive profitable growth for clients? Because at the end of the day, clients invest in marketing for only one reason: to drive sustainable, profitable growth. And so I think the big thing that we are seeing, and we will see more and more, is what I call the accountability of marketing investment. So it's about analytics, but it's ultimately about if I invest an incremental dollar, what's my marginal return? So the famous quote that said, I know that half my advertising doesn't work, I just don't know which half, well, that no longer exists. If it exists, the CMO doesn't usually have a long lifespan. They'll make change, and I think what we're seeing is clients are now saying, okay, what's working? Let's invest further behind those ideas or opportunities, and let's make sure that what we're doing is improving in that regard. So I think analytics and data is critical to making more informed decisions that will improve that return. I think if you think about the world we live in right now, we have a difficult economic environment. You basically have a flat growth in terms of the North American marketplace, and global growth is only 3 or 4%. So the clients, the companies themselves are under enormous pressure to produce incremental profitability on modest revenue growth. So marketing's role in that regard is to produce a far superior return on an ongoing basis. And so we're challenged with how do you utilize all of those elements to try and make brands more profitable. And that will continue to accelerate as there are more and more activist shareholders who are putting more and more pressure on clients. And as it relates to talent, I think one of the things that we feel is there are brilliant people in the marketplace. You got to empower them. If you restrict them, you will not get the most from them. If you empower them, you will find that they have amazingly innovative ways about coming up with brilliant solutions. What we have found is the smartest ideas of how consumers consume influence in a digital economy are coming from really young people. And so what we're trying to do is create an environment where people feel empowered to try stuff even if it doesn't work. Because some of our best ideas came out of things that at the beginning didn't work, but we stayed with it. So I think bringing fun and empowerment back, for us as a 14,000 person organization, is really critical.
I have the great luxury of going last, huh? I'm going to be a little bit contrarian about some of the things that were set up here today. So, and this will be obviously from a Subway perspective, but I think we look at the marketplace a little differently than most folks do. So I would make a distinction between long-term collaborations with media partners and short-term transactions. So we hear all the comments about the trading desk and the instantaneous data. We've got a pretty good sense of who our customers are and all the various segments that are there. I would say to you that we think that there's going to be more benefit in long-term collaborations with large media partners across the spectrum than we see potential benefit from the trading desk phenomenon. The reason for that is if you have a long-term collaboration, and I use that word intentionally rather than partnership because the ultimate business interests are not shared as they would be in a partnership, you can go back and have the discussion as we had with Facebook a while back saying, hey, we've done a lot of good stuff with you, but this thing didn't work so well, we need to do something different. Now, if that was only a one-time transaction, I would dare say that conversation may not have happened, or even if it did happen, it wouldn't have yielded a result that we were all comfortable with. So it's not that there's not going to be transactional stuff that's happening, but because there is such turnover among CMOs, fortunately I've been there a long time, so I haven't had to endure that. Many people focus on the real short-term transaction piece rather than the where do we see this going in a year or 2 years or 3 years, and where do we want to be from a media standpoint so that we stand out. Because frankly, as many folks have said, not only are you in competition with your direct category competitors in the massive media world that exists right now, you're really in competition with everybody for share of mind. And you got to be really smart about how you stand out and how you're a leadership brand, because at the end of the day, leadership brands attract capital, they attract consumers, and they are successful.
I actually really agree with that. I think we are finding at the Huffington Post that our most interesting advertising collaborations, I like the new word, are around content platforms, either with brands around their causes, like Johnson & Johnson's cause is global maternal well-being. So we've created an entire section for them, which has been sponsored for a year. We're halfway through with great results. And I think one of the reasons why this is, for me, the future, is because there is such attention deficit disorder among consumers that, even if you do like the huge Super Bowl ad, then next week there is something else, and you've spent all these millions of dollars and the world has moved on. So if you can be in front of the consumer day in, day out with new information, with new engagement, with new participation, you're much better off. And that doesn't mean the end of the full-page glossy ad or the end of the Super Bowl ad. But I think there is sort of a new way to engage with consumers that is much more sustained and that brings them in either around the cause that the brand wants to be associated with or around the content that the brand produces. We've just done one with General Mills, for example, where we created a platform around their content. It's transparently sponsored, so there's no problem in terms of the Chinese wall between advertising and edit. But it also deals with what you were talking about, which is really that increasingly self-expression is becoming the new entertainment. So, the weather at the underground is a great example of that. A lot of people still cannot understand why these people are paying $2,000 for the privilege of giving you information. In the same way that people still cannot understand why 30,000 people regularly blog on the Huffington Post for free. They still say, why? They sue us. They try to understand it. And it's just, that's what the new technologies have made possible. But they've made it possible because there is a longing in people to express themselves. Nobody ever wondered, why are people sitting on a couch watching bad TV without being paid for hours on end, right? Well, this is really the new entertainment.
David, obviously Facebook's approach to marketing comes back to this as well.
Yeah, I think it's new and evolving, but it's not that different from what came before and the evolutions that we've all lived through before, in the sense that the model on Facebook is, I think, exactly what we've just been talking about, which is create good content, and then Facebook is this incredible platform with nearly 1 billion people, so incredible reach and incredible targeting based on demographics, interests, all the things that people are doing and the connections that people associate. So it's that opportunity to reach people and also to have people telling your story, so it's not just a one-to-many, but actually engaging people telling your story. That's the first point. I think the second is around this notion of what is engaging content, and in that world the definitions change. When we went from print to radio, what did marketing look like? That had to evolve. When we went from radio to TV, the first television commercial was someone sitting there and reading copy that would have been a radio ad, except they were broadcasting the person on video reading the ad, right? Obviously we've come a long way, and I think so the expectation that these things suddenly go overnight from one to another, it's not quite that fast. But I think what we're seeing and what we're all doing in one way or another is figuring out, the world is much more real time now. It's not about sitting down and spending a ton of time preparing. Sometimes it's having something to say now, then getting relevant in the conversation and getting that shared.
I think it's really interesting. I kicked off the conversation asking about the future, and all of you guys have talked about what you're doing right now. And obviously, this is a panel of people who are sort of crafting the future of media, but it doesn't seem like you're thinking 3-5 years out in terms of sort of what's on the plate. And I'm wondering if perhaps, we talk about the rate of change and the adoption of smartphones and the shift online and, mobile devices and social, but are things not changing all that fast? And Eric, I wonder if you want to...
I did an interesting Google search in preparation for this panel, and I just typed the words, the future of media, into Google to see what I should say, because that's who you ask. And there were about 600 pages, of results, and so I clicked towards the end. And I found articles and panels and editorials with the exact title, The Future of Media, dating back to 1994. And they were talking about these exact same topics that we're talking about today, the digitization of media, the proliferation of technology, and the predictions, some of them came true, some of them didn't, but mostly the predictions in 1994, they took whatever existed then and put the word digital in front of it. So they said, you can see the demise of the newspaper and the rise of the digital newspaper, but no one saw the Huffington Post coming. No one saw the rise of the citizen journalist. No one saw Facebook coming. No one saw the disruptive impact of smartphones being in every pocket, in billions of people's pockets worldwide. So I guess my conclusion thinking about this is, and the other thing is, in 20 years in advertising, I don't think I worked in advertising for a single day when I didn't read an editorial or hear a speech or hear someone talk about the death of the television commercial. And that still hasn't happened. It's a remarkably resilient medium. Somehow, first the VCR was supposed to kill it, and then cable TV was going to kill it, and then satellite TV was going to kill it, and then the internet was going to kill it, and then the DVR was going to kill it, and it's still not dead. And I think that my conclusion is that, you know, media unfolds incrementally. And I think there's almost an addiction editorially to thinking about revolution, to think about the thing that's going to render obsolete everything that came before it in its wake. And that rarely happens. What usually happens instead is that new tools and new creative opportunities emerge, and I think it's much more important how you respond to those incremental changes than being able to predict them.
I do think empowerment is a bigger change over time. And you have to look at it globally. So, you know, we certainly all saw what it's been going on with Arab Spring and subsequent to that in North Africa. I had the privilege of being in Amboseli, Kenya this summer. Went to a school, and they teach weather at the school, which is interesting. They can't afford paper. They write in the sand, but all their parents had mobile phones. And they were prepaid phones, but they used them to get the weather forecast because that actually made a difference to crops. But it also began to have communication in very different ways. And this village, which had largely been not connected to any of the rest of the world, was. They're trying to figure out what to do with that. I think there's a lot of nations that have empowered citizens now that are trying to figure out what to do with that. I think that we've empowered people in the West more than they know what to do with. So I believe as people figure out how to use the empowerment, it will change societies. It's slow because people change slowly, and it's generational. I think the technology is way ahead of the human's ability to use it. That's the challenge. And I think when we see people stepping in and using their empowerment, big things happen.
Nigel, how fast are you seeing change?
Well, because I'd sort of, I'd slightly disagree with you in terms of the fact that, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of us up here are quite old, and we've been living that change.
Speak for yourself.
As Eric said, been living that change for 20 years, and it's right. It feels in some ways, it feels quite slow, you know, and it is incremental. But actually, whenever you have the perspective of looking back, you actually see how much has changed and how quickly, and it is actually quite phenomenal what's happened. And I don't think we're actually saying in most of the comments here that we're focused on today. It's just that we actually know the trajectory of that change, you know, and it's inevitable, and it is a runaway train. And what we have to do in our businesses is we have to structure those systemically, right, for what that change is going to be. You know, and in an advertising agency world, it is about ripping the silos out and empowering people that work for us to free up that innovation. I think in terms of, and again, I would actually say that I do actually think that, you know, trading desks are going to be really important, and the automation is going to be important. But I actually would agree with you that, again, whether it's Facebook, and, you know, that's what, you know, David and Cheryl and the team are trying to do, but Google for definite, Amazon, Apple for definite, possibly Samsung as well. These companies have enormous resources that are rebuilding the structural side of media, and that is an inevitability. And they're building these vertical ecosystems from content to operating system, all the way through to device. And you know, it will fundamentally change how we access media, how media is traded, how media is bought, and the market will be radically different in 3 to 5 years' time. It will be very real time, but there will still be that requirement fundamentally to engage with people. But just to come back to Miles's point, I think media is going to be so much more important to business, so much more important to society, because that point of engagement and the point of transaction actually is getting closer and closer and more measurable through media. So we are fundamentally, all the outputs that media has been measured by and the success that brands have in it are going to go away, and it's all going to be about outcomes. You know, what actually happened.
So, a couple things. What Nigel said is very true. If you look based upon a sort of 2 to 3% growth of media spend, if you look back historically, 5 years from now, you'll say, wow, there was a fair bit of change. But what Eric said, I think, is the most critical, and that is that the media wants to hear that there's some transformational thing, like when will the 30-second TV commercial die? 40% today, it's going to be dead, right? It's going to be zero. It doesn't happen. Trees don't grow to the sky, and things don't go to zero. I was in the check printing business. So people said, is that still a business? Well, actually, it's a bigger business than ever before. It's just declining at a slower rate than people anticipated. So with regard to advertising, the practical reality is the mix is changing. The mix is changing faster than any other macro trend. We're in the advertising agency business. So our job is to understand what you're describing are all of these incredibly innovative tools in mediums that are being developed that we have to utilize to increase the effectiveness of the advertising. But still, if Bill Bernbach, may he rest in peace, was alive, he'd be one of the most innovative digital guys in the world, even though he'd be 100. But he was a brilliant guy. So brilliant creative people will always figure out how to utilize tools to increase the effectiveness of brilliant ideas and brilliant creativity to drive results. Thus, the resonation of that story was, is, and will always be the most critical. I think, you know, the reality is there are some people who see the future. You know, if we, you know, Steve Jobs saw the future. Bill Gates sees the future. Mark Zuckerberg sees the future. And then there's everybody else in the world. And so the role of the agency is to understand what's going on and to try and make modifications through the utilization of tools and technology to increase on an ongoing basis the effectiveness. And the critical thing is you got to try stuff. So if someone said, look, I know what the future is. I know what it is. I see it out there. I know what the future is. I'm like, hey, man, show me the way, but I'm not going to bet big, because if you know what's going to happen 5 years from now, you better be rich by now, because otherwise you're Mark Zuckerberg. So the one thing that is a macro trend is Facebook is becoming a mass medium. So of my 4 daughters, one of them knows what she wants to do. She's 15. She wants to bear children for Justin Bieber. So she's smart. She's smart. So she gave me the statistic. I said, look, Julia, you're 15. I got to go on a panel. Give me some facts. So she says, well, you know, Mousy, calls me Mousy. She said, you know, Mousy, did you know that Justin Bieber has 40 million followers on Facebook? So I'm not that smart. I go, wow, I think that's a lot. She says, yeah, there are 30,000 people who say goodnight to him every night. I'm one of them. I say, good. You realize that 40 million, the American Idol's final episode only had 20 million people. You had 130 million people watching Super Bowl. So Facebook, social media is becoming a mass medium. And I think the other big macro thing that we sort of alluded to is the difference between paid media and unpaid media. And I think the biggest macro shift that has happened and is going to continue to happen is that unpaid media will become a more and more important part of the marketing mix, because what Ariana said, that people want to be heard. They want the opportunity to engage either with their friends or brands, in a way that they control their destiny. And that's going to be a big macro trend for the future.
I was just going to echo some of that and build. I
Of course you will. I said only good things about you.
You did, thank you. And but I think that
Say good night to Justin Bieber.
I don't. I am very old for someone at Facebook, so that's lost on me. We'll leave that to a younger demographic. But I think the question, I think this notion about transformation and talking about the future, I actually think that everything is happening so fast right now, and in some ways, we don't see it and feel it because we're all a part of it. But I mean, just think about how offensive is it to all of us that we might sit in here and not have service to get our email or be on the plane, and the plane might not have internet. So I mean, that is, people, like, we get upset about that stuff, right? Let alone a smartphone in our pockets. Every one of us, 5 billion people around the world have these devices, and in time we will have devices that are much more powerful than any computing devices anyone had a decade ago, and it's with us all the time. And you can't understate the importance all of these trends are made possible. And I think so it doesn't feel like a day-to-day, so in the sense that you may not feel it today, you may not feel it next week, but the impact that's having is dramatic. And I think the points that Miles was just making, and I think is really important, is it's not, these shifts aren't, it's not like the overthrow of a government or the Arab Spring, that one day you did all of this and the next day you don't buy any more TV and it's all digital. It's transformative over time, it's an evolution. But the notion that if you're not out there figuring these things out, then you are missing out. And I think that's what we're seeing. And I think that's, people like Tony, Tony alluded to the fact that there's missteps, there's ups and downs in this road. And I think all of us experience that. So it's not as easy as saying, we're going to be here in 10 years, or we're going to be here next year. It's about getting in there and trying and experimenting and figuring things out. And that's very much the spirit.
Can I jump on that comment for a second? So from my viewpoint, the smart experimentation piece is actually the biggest piece that we need to do. So we're pretty fortunate at Subway that we've had a lot of success, and our team and our franchisees give us a lot of leeway to try new stuff. Some things work out fabulously, sometimes work out not so much, but you learn from them. I was mentioning to David backstage, when we were doing our initial stuff with Facebook, we had 2 events that happened simultaneously. We were promoting a couple years ago that our friend Jared was going to run the ING New York City Marathon for us, and we also had built a program specifically for Facebook called High School Heroes. Well, if you track, our likes on Facebook, that's the first big bump you see. Now, we've done lots of other bumps since then, but that was, us developing in concert with other folks content. And I think from a brand perspective, if you take a long-term view, we need to have an appropriate role in some of the development of the content, because the brand's got to be there in a way other than, I'd like to interrupt you for a second to show you this commercial, which has got nothing to do with anything you've just seen in the preceding X number of minutes.
That's a really good point. And one of the things that makes looking into the future confusing is that everybody pays lip service to certain things, but not everybody practices them. So everybody pays lip service to engagement. Have you ever heard a media brand not paying lip service to engagement? But look at TV. TV remains an incredibly not engaging and engaged medium. We launched HuffPost Live, which is our streaming network that put engagement right at the center of everything. So, every TV show at the end will say, and here we have somebody saying that on Facebook, or here is a tweet, which is like an afterthought, not integrated in the show, and we still have the interruptions with the commercials. We have no interruptions. Everything is sponsored. Verizon and Cadillac were our first sponsors. And instead, the viewer, there are bookers who interview the viewer. So anybody who wants to participate is treated like a guest. There, again, because we want to maintain a certain quality and a certain civility, you're going to interview them first to make sure that what they have to say is interesting. But there are more than half of each segment consists of viewers. As a result, everybody who comes on stays on for a minimum of 18 minutes. So the participation, the engagement is enormous because it is their show and it goes on for 12 hours a day. So I think television is moving in that way. It's really taking the two-screen solution and making it one screen. But it's moving very, very much more slowly than the rhetoric around it.
But to go back to a point that Miles made about TV advertising dollars, TV still draws over 40% of all advertising dollars. And just looking at the statistics, you know, here we are talking about the pace of change, and even though we see internet ads driving, you know, digital ads driving all the growth, the allocation of ad dollars is still very skewed towards the traditional medium. And Miles and Nigel, I'm curious for your thoughts on whether the dollars should be moving faster.
So two things. With regard to the comment that my esteemed colleague made, I couldn't agree more. We as an industry in advertising agencies, we spend the lowest amount on research and development of any industry I can think of. Not media companies, not the technology side, I'm talking the agencies. And the challenge is because procurement, the client procurement activity, barely allows you to make a reasonable rate of return, let alone having sufficient incremental dollars to be able to invest in R&D. But the investment in R&D is critical to try new and innovative ways to utilize tools and technology to increase the effectiveness of advertising. So we've tried to do that. We keep on pushing the edge of the envelope. We invest in technology on an ongoing basis. But it's that the challenge is to find those incremental dollars, to have the commitment and the boldness to do it. Now, you asked...
Can I build on that for 1 second? So one of the interesting things to me, because I was in the agency world a long time ago, and I had lots of big tech clients, I'd see these enormous, more zeros than you can count, R&D budgets. And then you'd have somebody in the marketing group there, or maybe sometimes even the CEO, say, we're a marketing-driven company. And I would say, well, then why don't you put some money into marketing R&D? I can do it with 4 less zeros than you're doing it on your other budget. The business case on that is always a little bit hard because you're not exactly sure of the outcome. But frankly, for marketing-driven companies, and fortunately we are, if you don't have some testing and learning going on in the media realm, I think you're going to be, you know, way, way, way behind.
But can I just, I do want to pick up on that, because that's absolutely the critical point. When you just said that we're not quite sure about the outcome and where we're moving towards, and why media is going to be more important to business, and why I do think, you know, if you look at it for the last 30 years, marketing as a discipline within organizations has become less influential. And I think it's going to become much more influential.
Not ours.
Yeah, well, and that's why you've probably been successful. You know? I mean, and to pick up on Miles, and I'll let him carry on, is procurement, you know, has almost taken over in terms of driving down the influence of marketing, because it's become a cost rather than an investment. And that whole point about being able to start to really measure outcomes is going to be a fundamental change which will actually drive part of the shift in terms of the allocation of media dollars. And I'll pick up on your point about TV after I let Miles carry on. Sorry.
So, Julia, you talked about something which is totally factual. 40% of all advertising is TV. And upfronts are going to grow again, and pricing still has strength, although not the same amount of strength as it used to have. So you have a declining growth rate. You don't have a decline, you have a declining growth rate, so that it's growing but at a slower rate. But you didn't ask about newspaper, and you didn't ask about radio, and you didn't talk about magazines, and you didn't talk about outdoor. So not all media are created equal. So there's a shift. So I don't know the exact statistics, but I'm not long. I didn't say I love reading newspapers, but I wouldn't want to own one. And I didn't say I don't like reading magazines. I'm one of the great magazine consumers. In fact, I lose the magazine, so I buy 2 or 3 copies, so I'll remember. And I still read it online too. But the point is, you got to look at the other aspects of media. And so the allocation of dollars of the pie has changed dramatically, and that's going to continue on an accelerated rate. So I think Nigel can talk more to that than I can about who's been the biggest beneficiaries and to what extent numerically. You asked me a question earlier that I just want to throw in. Why do I like media now? Didn't like media before. Because every time, 7 years ago, Sir Martin, call him Sir Martin, not Martin, Sir Martin, said that you need to have many people in many offices in many countries and scale was all that matters. I don't believe that. I think you got to be, I think, smart, innovative, insurgent, think outside the box, entrepreneurial aspect to media today, especially with all the social media activities, all the other channels, is really critical. And I think entrepreneurs are going to redefine a part of the media mix so that there is an opportunity today. So just because you have $56 billion of media buying doesn't mean you're going to be more effective for innovative solutions for Subway. And so where we see is that we have identified a number of firms that we could bring together in partnership that I thought could carve a niche to be an innovative entrepreneurial alternative in the media mix. And that didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago. So that's why I see it today. Doesn't mean we're going to take all the market share. I just think we can capture our own modest little share and be successful at it.
But I think we're missing your question. We have all the channels. We have TV and internet and mobile. TV has a really important role. TV dollars are there because they work. TV dollars are there because it's a place where the audience engages in a different way. So our advertisers use TV quite effectively, particularly in the morning, which is when our audience is engaged, and in prime when they're engaged. So I think we are investing in R&D. The cable MSOs are investing in R&D. TV, the manufacturers are investing in R&D. TV will get more interesting. TV has to compete, but I don't think TVs are leaving the living room anytime soon.
Well, the big change is, of course, the multi-platform, the third screen of the smartphone and the TV. How do you address that?
Well, I think you've got to program to it together, right? So I think those technologies are working better together. We're certainly using our information so people can watch two together on our programming, but we also have other programmers. It turns out that weather is very important to sports. It turns out that people who pick fantasy games really care about how people perform. So we have weather that's working during sports games. We have weather that worked during the Olympics because it really mattered in some of those games more than others. So I think you can add to the story and make TV more interesting. And then the communication works in both screens. They have to work together. But in the end, I think that TV will continue to get good dollars as long as it performs.
One interesting phenomenon is that in difficult economic times, if you look at Europe right now, I just came back from Italy where we launched HuffPost, and there's been a 10% reduction in advertising in television, in newspapers, and a 10% increase in online. And the reason is partly because it's cheaper, substantially cheaper still everywhere, and partly because of the accountability factor, because you can know more clearly what's working, what's not working, and when your budgets are shrinking, that becomes increasingly important.
Look, the most impactful medium for Super Bowl is TV. But what we're not talking about the most important thing, which is it's the integration of all disciplines that come together. So when people say, is Super Bowl advertising important? You say, yes, it is. Is the TV part important? Yes, but you're not talking about what's happening before, during, and after. You're not talking about all the gaming activity that goes around it. You're not talking about social media. You're not talking about experiential. You're not talking about all kinds of activity that tie together. So for us, we don't look at silos. We look at the integration of all disciplines in the most effective way to drive return on investment for clients. And so we're talking about things in siloed ways, but it's the harmony or orchestration of all those disciplines that actually drives the results.
You guys need to rebundle so it'd make it easier for us clients.
Well,
no, I'm serious on that because
it'd be easier for us too.
Well, because
you do that?
Because at the end of the day, so look, we believe in the multi-screen thing. If you watch Sunday Night Football on NBC on Sunday, you saw plenty of Subway ads. If you happen to have a fantasy team on CBS Sports, you'd open that up, you'd also see different Subway communication that was related to, but obviously appropriate for that format. So we do that stuff all the time. The thing that I miss, being an old big agency guy, is that the media teams, and MediaCom's our agency and they do a really good job, but they're not as fully aware of all the marketing assets that we have, so they would naturally say, I should do this. So they got to go back to my media team or my marketing team and say, gee, Subway's working with Robert Griffin III now. Maybe we should reallocate our spots because he's going to be in a high-profile game next week or something like that. That kind of stuff, because of the way unbundling has happened, makes it a lot harder to get the synergies that we would all like across platforms, from my experience.
I think the thing that to me always feels incredibly absent from these discussions is the creative idea. Meaning, here we've been talking, for all this time about the way we reach people and the mechanism and the integration and the technological disruptions. And the thing that hasn't changed and I think is more important than ever is the power of great creative craftsmanship and great disruptive ideas through those channels. And content matters more than ever. With all of this disruption, with all of this fracturing of eyeballs and people having so much access to so many things, the power of a breakthrough idea actually matters more than ever. And to me, the delivery mechanism will always be in flux. It will always change. There will always be a new tool and a new opportunity and a new way to reach people. That's the nature of media. It's the nature of technology. But unless that content matters, unless that section you created for Johnson & Johnson is great content, it won't be a lasting, powerful advertising medium. And I'm not saying it's not, but I think that the idea of it is really interesting. At the end of the day, it comes down to, is that going to break through? Is that going to attract people's attention? And here, in this day and age, with all of this technological disruption, a well-crafted television commercial, a well-crafted message still has the ability to break through, and actually has more ability to break through. One of the agencies in MDC just did a spot for Samsung that disrupted, the iPhone 5 launch, and the primary way people saw it was on television, followed by virality online. And so that didn't make it an interactive ad. It made it a great piece of content that had the value to spread itself, that was worth spreading on its own. And so I think that gets lost in our sort of fascination with the technological shifts and the way that messages are delivered. And there's this one constant in marketing to me, which is great creative ideas will always matter most.
But what is different now is that this great content may be produced by professionals, or it may be produced by someone in the conventional, stereotypical way in their parents' basement in their pajamas. And that's what's changed.
It might be, but it has to be great.
Yeah, but it
Some
could
of
be
it's
great.
great,
And most
and
of
some
it
of
is
it's
not.
insufferable.
Most of it is not, absolutely. But what I'm saying is that the fact that media, and that's really absolutely the future, is going to be a hybrid. It's going to be the combination of great, let's say, journalistic, content-producing enterprises and a platform. And as a platform, any media company that's not a platform anymore does not have a future. Because you can't just be about your own journalists. We have 800 journalists, editors around the world, but we also are a platform. And we are just as proud of being a platform that allows people to have a voice as we are of our Pulitzer. That for me is the future. It's not either or. Again, what you said, we keep thinking that anytime something new comes, it supplants the old. It doesn't. It just kind of combines itself with it in new and different variations.
But you're toggling between talking about the Huffington Post as a journalistic force and an advertising force.
And a platform. And a platform for our readers, our viewers, people who want to express themselves in whatever medium, in pictures, in video, in text, whatever.
But if you want to pull the thread through, I do believe if the future media, the economics are going to go to the best creative. And I think there's been a challenge in the historical model, which is, the agencies were doing the creative idea for the brands, the media was doing the creative idea for the entertainment. The media agents were pulling that all together, and the clients were trying to hold it on. I think the best clients are getting creative, and they're collaborating, and they're taking the lead, and they're pulling from all those sources, including citizens. And I think the business models are changing to not protect bad creative, to not get cable access for bad shows. At the end of the day, I think people have more control to choose great creative. They're going to vote. The economics will go to creative ideas. Every time. I would invest in that R&D if I were you. Tell your investors you have to, suck it up. If you don't get great creative, I think you're going to be out of all of these businesses 10 years from now. Creative matters.
I agree with you 100%. I think the reason why dollars will go to creative, the best creative, is because, as Bill Bernbach said, it's not creative if it doesn't sell. Ultimately, the most impactful. I mean, what Eric said is the most critical thing. The business has always been about impactful ideas, brilliant creative ideas or content that resonate with consumers. And at the end of the day, it's amazing how sophisticated and smart consumers are. They know good from bad. They know good content from bad content. They know good advertising from bad advertising, and they they vote with their feet. And when something like Samsung happens, it's unbelievable. You know, like in 2004, there was this thing, it's a little self-serving, but as you know, self-serving comes natural to me. But, you know, Subservient Chicken had 1 billion hits. I mean, that was probably the most impactful viral ad that had ever happened up until that time. And it was a very inexpensive ad, or online piece of content, but consumers reacted that day. From that day forward, they had 1 million hits in the first day. So the consumer, the one thing that we have learned is the consumer, your sister, your brother, your cousin, your mom, your aunt, they're very sophisticated, and they know the difference between good creative and content and bad. And they will respond.
And I want to get to you in a second, but I just want to bring in Tony here, because Subway had such great examples of how you used the creative from the consumer to really make this a community effort.
Yeah, so Julia, as you and I were talking about in preparation for this, I think our view of the business from a marketer's perspective has changed a lot. So you and I, although they are many years apart, have the similar background of having worked on the student newspaper in college. I was actually the editor-in-chief of the Student Daily at Notre Dame. And when people ask me, I've had a lot of good jobs, a lot of significant jobs in between, but they say, what is marketing like now? I'm like, it's like being the editor-in-chief at Notre Dame again, because you walk into the office and you're like, okay, what are the big stories on campus today? What are the big stories in the sporting arena? Because back when I was there, at least Notre Dame was good in football. What's coming over the AP wire? What's coming over Reuters? What are we gonna go with today? And then you've got to make all those decisions that are relevant for that campus. Well, as a brand, you've got what's trending on Twitter, what's going on Facebook, what are our competitors doing, what's the feedback from our system about what's going on, and you have to make all of those decisions. Now, the word story has been used up here many times today. I'm from the school of thought that a brand is a story, or a brand of our size is actually multiple stories, because we got lots of different dimensions to us, and we're always trying to add to those stories. And those stories are not something that's going to be there today, gone tomorrow. It's something we're going to want to build on, and we're going to want to have marketing assets, because frankly, I don't look at marketing as an expense. We want to have marketing assets that we build over time. So, we're famous for Jared, but if you've been paying attention to what we do, we have a wide cadre of folks that we refer to as the famous fans of Subway. All those folks, first and foremost, eat at Subway regularly, and they've been working with us for an awful long time. So if Michael Strahan, who we started working with when he was in the twilight of his career with the New York Giants, and then did some great stuff for us, and he went on to work with Fox, even had a TV show on Fox outside the Football Sundays, and he's now working with Kelly. Michael Strahan on a Tuesday walks into a Subway, takes a picture of the menu, and tweets it out saying, hey, to all you guys that don't think I eat here I am at Subway today, and here's what I'm having. Did I tell him to do that? No. Did I love that he did that? Absolutely. Because he feels like he's vested in the brand. If Ryan Seacrest, who we do an awful lot of work with, is over in London, and we helped him do his radio show over there while he was working for NBC on the Olympics, and Ryan wants to send out a tweet about something he saw at a Subway in London that day, of course I'm happy with that. So but those are all continuing stories. They're not a one-shot, and it's not a contract with them saying, I need you to do 4.2 tweets over the span of 17 weeks. That's not the way it works. The brand has got to be much more interactive and much more long-term story-based to get that kind of stuff. And frankly, we've been really fortunate the last couple of years. There's a polling company called YouGov, and they look at all brands, not just restaurants, and we actually have been the #1 brand for positive brand buzz each of 2010, 2011, and also the first half of 2012. And I hope my guys will throw something at me if I'm wrong with this, but the last time I checked, we're still #1 this year. That's because We are inherently a social brand, and we allow people to interact with our brand, and that is very contrary to the way most marketers thought even a few years ago. I got to hold and protect the brand. I got to decide everything. You know, we have some things that we hold on to pretty firmly, but we don't mind people interacting with our brand because it's kind of natural. If you've been into a Subway, you get to pick everything. So it's a very, very interactive ordering process.
I want to pick up actually on a point that Nigel made a little earlier, fairly briefly, which is about the sort of the arc of the power of the marketer within organizations and within business in general. Because I think one of the things, the content has always been important, and now there's new and powerful ways to create and distribute content. I think the other thing that as you think about the future of media, the future of marketing is, and it's really empowering marketers and all of us, is the ability to target and to speak to the right people in the right way. You have to be genuine, you have to be authentic in the ways that Tony's talking about. But the notion that you used to look at, you know, an audience across an entire network or across this entire room, well, when you think about it, all of us have some things in common or we wouldn't be in this room. But there's Justin Bieber fans in here, there's New York Yankees fans in here, there's people who love the weather, there's all of these micro, you know, if you were to actually try to map out what we look like, we all look very different. And marketers now have this power to not just own that customer relationship, existing clients, new clients, acquisition, but actually to speak to people in ways that are authentic, true to the brand, but also really targeted in the right places at the right time, the right ways. And I think when you think about what that's going to create and the type of power, it's going to put a lot more power in the hands of marketers, but I also think it's going to create, some of that's going to be better content, some of it's just getting, it's stuff that you want to see at the right time in the right place.
But sorry, I was just going to say, you know, what we're talking about is the power that marketers have to utilize this different medium and to utilize creativity. What we haven't also talked about is the power of social media, of the interactivity. So it's the interaction between the consumer and the brand back to the consumer. What we have found that we are learning, and our clients are learning, as much from our brand detractors as we are from our brand evangelists. So a lot of things that are very powerful in an adverse way is when you hear things coming back about bad experiences, unfortunate incidents, et cetera, and how they're handled.
We're lucky we don't have a lot of brand detractors, so.
But so that it's a critical thing because it is an interactive. I mean, Ariana talked about, you know, the need that people feel to be empowered. And so you're getting constant feedback on an ongoing basis. But when they become, you know, when you can convert a brand detractor to a brand evangelist, it's amazing how powerful they are about communicating in a social media way about how wonderful their negative experience became very positive, what management did to assist that, and how powerful that activity is.
And that's a big education for brands. I remember a few years ago when we did our first experience with a brand that participated in doing their own blogs, you know, what we call sponsor-generated blogs. And it was a big hotel chain. And it happened that the first comment to one of these blogs was a negative one, about a negative experience that that particular reader had had at one of these hotels. The first response of the CMO was, oh my God, you know, must pull this campaign out. So we worked with them, and they realized that the worst thing they could do was to pull the campaign out, because this detractor could go on Facebook, could go on Twitter, you know, they could just be somewhere where the brand could not respond. So they responded. Others came forward with positive experience. It turned out to be an entirely positive experience, but that's because the brand stayed in the arena. The brand, any brand, no longer has the ability to simply disappear behind a glossy ad or behind a 30-second commercial and not respond to detractors. I mean, that's probably the kiss of death.
Let me try and pull together some of the themes there and tie them back to your original question about the money. Absolutely, it's about ideas and creativity and having great ideas. And those ideas live very differently now in an open, interconnected and transparent world where consumers are empowered. And the brands that are winning are the ones that are leaning forward into that, and they're embracing and they're open. But all the conversations that I also have with big clients, whether it's a Diageo or a GM or a Home Depot, is scale. How do I scale that idea? How do I scale this creativity in a world that is so atomized and where scale actually works different? And the top-down, push-out scale of an analog world doesn't work in the same way anymore. And it is about getting everything working together, and actually it is also very much about tying together the bought media, the owned platforms, tying together all of those conversations, not just back and forward with the brand, but between the consumers themselves. But fundamentally, what brands say and what brands know is competitive advantage comes by innovating at scale ahead of their competitors. And the reason why television is still getting the dollars, and those dollars are fragile, they're also, if you look at the nature of television and what actually television is, it's very, very different now. And where those dollars, even in television, are being allocated is different. But the reason it works is because it scales, and it scales very quickly. And actually, in the Super Bowl, the ad is just that first moment. And then that's the tip of the iceberg. But that's what people can see, and see quickly at 130 million people. But then, if you don't do anything with it, if you don't then take that idea and actually join up all the loose pieces, because David's got scale. He's got nearly 1 billion people. He's got 950 million people, right, plus. But it's, how do I get all those people? How do I get my brand? How do I get my idea across and through that? And one, it's about being really good, but two, it is about how all those different media work together. How do I actually holistically plan that for my brand? And how do I get it into my idea into the hands of the right people and scale it in a sustainable way? And that is going to be, that's what we're grappling with moving forward. And, to pick up on Arianna's point, the TV market in Italy was down 40% in August. The whole media market in Spain is down 18% this year. But that's down 18% on what was 25% down last year. The whole media market is roughly half what it was in 2008. And that's partly driven by recession, but it's actually that recession is actually has tipped it into a little bit of a vision of what you might see 5 years out, actually, where brands are actually finding out other ways of trying to get their messages, get their great ideas, and get their strategies into the hands of people. And that's not necessarily by throwing lots of money at it. And they're actually very focused on, how do I not spend the 50% that's wasted? And so I think that the media industry has got to really be able to demonstrate, whether it's television, all those other media which are falling off a cliff, what are they delivering? What is the outcome? What's the value they're delivering to the brand? And what is the value they're delivering to the consumer?
Just adding to what Nigel said, sort of two things. One is the most innovative marketers for a special event activity like Super Bowl, their marketing starts well in advance of the event. They've got campaigns, they've got contests, they've got online activity, they've got experiential, they've got PR, all leading up to Super Bowl, well in advance of the event. The event is just a tipping point, and then it continues thereafter. The second thing that I think is really critical is that the integration activity is a perpetuation, and it's never the same for any one brand. And so someone says, "Can you give me one of those subservient chickens?" Well, no, it's not all. What works for one brand doesn't work for all brands. What works at a point in time doesn't necessarily work. So I think one of the critical things, and David's reinforced this, and Eric reinforced this, you need to try stuff. Okay. One of my partners had this expression: you need speed and genius. So it's not just important to have great ideas. It's not just important to be ahead of your competitors. You need both. You need brilliant ideas ahead of your competitors all the time. So you need speed and genius. That did not exist before. So more than ever, you can't have one of those two competitive advantages. You need both.
Yeah, it is all about build small, fail fast, scale rapidly. That's the thing.
But ultimately, isn't it about identifying needs ahead of others and even ahead of the people who may not even know what the needs are? I mean, that for me is, I mean, just look at Jack Dorsey's Square. You know, he identified a need for small business to be able to have credit card transactions that are not so expensive, made it simple. It's now already an $8 billion business. For us, you know, the big need for people is reducing stress in their lives. That's what we're betting on. That's what we want to be really great at providing solutions for, and working with brands that want to be identified with something which millions of people may not be already absolutely clear that that's what they need in their lives. But the data is unequivocal that more and more people are waking up to the realization that this is not a sustainable way to live, and they see it in their children, and they see it in themselves. So again, I think identifying needs before they're absolutely obvious and mainstream has always been the way for new brands to emerge and for all brands to continue growing.
I think it's interesting the role Twitter and also Facebook are playing in allowing brands to figure out what their consumers want, what customers want. And David, I'm curious for your thoughts about how to sort of use Twitter without competing with Twitter.
Yeah, so there are 200 tweets per minute about the weather. So we work closely with them, and we actually compile that because it gives people good notification. But we also talk to them about extending the conversation. So just yesterday, we announced that we're going to name the winter storms. Nobody's named blizzards, so they named hurricanes. And then Twitter made it a story because we named them after Greek gods and goddesses, and they said,
Thank you very much.
wait till you hear the rest of the story. So Twitter said, let's engage people on the rejected names. So there were hundreds of names. There was Storm Bieber, which is annoying and won't go away. There was Storm Romney that missed 47% of the country. They were quite fun. And this then created content back on our channels, which now people are picking up on their channels. And so I think it's a great way, and particularly, the way Twitter works is a great way for people to comment and participate real time.
So this is gamifying your business. And I want to bring in Eric's thoughts on sort of the gamification of marketing of everything.
I think that term is dramatically overused. I think that actually very little marketing has been gamified. I'm fascinated with the concept of it, but gamification to me, has become a new buzzword for interactivity. For anything you can click on, or anything you can forward, or anything you can like or dislike or comment on, people are now calling that, kind of referring to that as gamification. I think that what really is fascinating to me about games and about what, the sort of sticky part of them are for human beings is this constant cycle of challenge and accomplishment and reward. And usually some stature within that little digital, online world that comes with the reward. But, playing games is the only medium, the only entertainment medium where you're failing almost 100% of the time, where you have to earn the right to finish the thing you're doing by skill. And there was a fascinating TED Talk given by a woman named Jane McGonigal, who's a PhD and studies the impact of games. And someone applied the rules of Facebook, of Farmville, to an actual community garden. And they created an app and gave it away for free amongst the community, and you got points and you got stature for actually watering actual plants and for actually putting down the fertilizer. And the participation in that community garden raised by like 5,000%. That's gamification. That's making participation and action into that sense of challenge, accomplishment, reward, stature.
But that's also something else which is incredibly important, which is doing something for good. So doing something that you want to do, but also that helps, in this case, the community. And that, for me, is another huge trend that we've barely begun to scratch the surface of. When people want to bring together their values with their leisure time, with their contributions, with their livelihood. That's just begun to happen, but it's going to be a huge new trend.
I would say from a macro perspective, games will be more and more important going forward. It will grow as an industry. And I'll tell you how you see it. Go to a restaurant sometime and see children. And if they're really difficult, they have a game, because it keeps them happy. If they're not difficult, they have a game, because it allows the parents to actually have dinner. And so the age by which people are involved in gaming is greater than ever, and the amount of time, I don't know the fact, Eric, but the amount of time people are engaged in gaming is growing on an ongoing basis. And the element of competitiveness that exists in human beings is such that I think the gaming industry overall will continue to grow. And there's some unbelievable statistics, like, I should know this, but Eric said, I said, what's the market cap? And he said $13 billion. And I was like, oh my God, that's bigger than any single other advertising agency holding company except one, because of the currency. I mean, so the values of these things are extraordinary. And the loyalty factor is incredible of what consumers have to games, and the amount of time they spend on them is incredible in relation to other alternative mediums. That will continue to grow, in my opinion, in the years to come.
I would just pick up, and I actually think it's not just games. I think games in some ways are a leading indicator of a lot of other trends or a lot of other transformation we're going to see in industries, much the way Huffington Post has transformed media and journalism, and games, and Zynga and other Activision, others are transforming gaming. And there's we talked about empowerment of people earlier. I think this is happening across the board, and it's happening more quickly in other industries. This will come in to, I mean, one of the things that I have sort of a love-hate relationship is the term social, because you can think about social within the context of media and think about you have media and you've got print and you've got this thing in the corner, you've got something called social. But I think, if we think about the way we live our lives, people are the operating system of our lives. There's nothing we do in our lives that isn't informed in some way by people, and asking people, where should we live, where should we go for food, let's do something together, and so on. And so I think this is, games is a great example for the reasons that we've talked about, but I think we could think about almost any type of business that is going to be transformed in some ways just by the empowerment of people, the ability to connect, the ability to learn from people. And to me, that's, that is the transformative thing of how do you actually harness all of this power to inform decisions, to create these interactive experiences that become so intrinsic to what we do, we don't even just think about it. It's, it's in your pocket. And when you're walking down the street in a new city and you need to find, be it a hotel, be it a restaurant, be it whatever you need, it's just, you'll have it there because you can tap into this.
But does that, Facebook's such a powerful medium because of what you just described, because you can connect with people and get their real unvarnished opinions kind of in a mass way and yet very personal way. Does the presence of advertising dollars contaminate that? Meaning, is it a less compelling advertising medium precisely because it's such a compelling medium for transparency and truth and honesty and individual opinion?
Not unless we screw it up, would be my argument. I mean, I think, look, the reality is that there's always been good advertising, there's always been bad advertising, and you want a TV or print and digital, we've all seen great ads and we've all seen terrible ads. Our strong belief is that content, great marketing has always been based on great content, and there's incredible place, incredible opportunity, and we're seeing that on Facebook. There's also some that are bad that no one wants, and so we're trying to build systems that reward great marketing. That's part of why the connections with people, the sharing needs to be a part of it, and frankly, we both can build that into distribution, which makes it cheaper, and pricing, which says good content that gets shared gets voted up, and the opposite. So we're always going to have that. I think the quality is a separate metric from whether or not it belongs. Our argument is it belongs. We just want it to be really good.
But I do think there's a real burden on the collaboration in those environments. We have some of this. So the other place we use Twitter and Facebook is to save lives. So we encourage, it's how people tell their friends and families tornadoes are coming and hurricanes are coming. And when they don't have electricity, it's the way they communicate. And in those environments, there are ad sponsorships that work. In the stuff we do with My Friends Weather, which is social, there are good ad sponsors, but only when they collaborate with us and the message relates to the community. I think if you try to interrupt them with something that's outside that flow, it's like interrupting a conversation and being annoying. So because I think people are having conversations. So the right brands can tell their stories in a conversation, but if you don't do the work, I do think it's annoying. I do think it interrupts the flow of a community.
But that's, I guess, what I'm referring to. There was that, and I don't know how truthful this was and how much of this was just Aaron Sorkin's imagination, but there was that great scene, or that great thread in the movie about Facebook about when to introduce advertising, because advertising was going to make it not cool. And yet, advertising is what's paying the bills. And the value of Facebook to advertisers is the aggregation of eyeballs. And I feel like one of the things that has to happen in the future of media is that if all media is going to become more interactive, more social, more driven by the user, and advertising is going to foot the bill, it can't be always the uninvited guest.
Well, but that gets back to the authenticity point, right?
That's right. And so I think that the currency that matters most today is transparency and authenticity.
Right.
And
So we do a lot of stuff in and around content, and the question we always ask is, do we have a reasonably appropriate role there? So you can go in because you're writing a check and say, I should have a role here, but that doesn't work. Okay. So we there's plenty of times that we've taken some interesting creative risks, most of which have turned out well, where the writers, the producer, the star of the show says, I want to do X, Y, Z.
But I think that,
and on that those kind of things, you think about it, take a deep breath and say, okay, so I'll probably get some franchisee from the middle of the country that won't like it, but it's on late night TV, so I'll be okay. Well, so but that kind of stuff has to happen all the time, and then that content becomes shareable and it becomes talked about, and it's very, very positive. But especially when, in our category, the kind of people that we reach, you're dealing with humor all the time, and humor on a sheet of paper can be very different than how it's delivered, and you got to be you're trusting the skill and the talent of the creative people to make it happen in the right way.
Well, just one of the examples of that was Domino's Pizza. When Crispin Porter Bogusky took over that account, they said we should do some TV spots, and we did research, and clients, the customer said basically product sucks. So they actually said the crust tastes like cardboard, the cheese tastes like bathroom caulking, and the tomato sauce tastes like ketchup. And so we said, look, you got to reformulate the product, and you got to be upfront and candid about it. And it sort of was contrary to everything that you've ever taught in marketing, which is never criticize the product. And they apologized, and they came out with a new product and they did these taste tests to all the people that criticized it, and they delivered to their home. And what ended up happening is they went from number 3 market share to number 1, and the stock price went up like 5-fold. But
in pizza, we're number 2 behind McDonald's, dude.
But the critical thing was to take the risk. But the critical thing was, and I wasn't involved in this, but it was to take the risk. So you needed a great idea, and you needed a client who was prepared to take the risk, and then all of a sudden the social media that came behind it was 5 times more powerful than the paid media. So Jeannie Mose at CNN did this whole thing about it, and then even Jim Cramer did something, and Jon Stewart said, why doesn't the GOP pull a Domino's? I mean, it sort of fed on itself.
We do have to open up for questions, so I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to give Nigel the last thought, and then we're going to open up to a couple of quick questions.
I was just going to build on that. Transparency, authenticity, absolutely. Great ideas that engage with people, absolutely. But to go back to Ariana's point, for sustainable long-term growth, actually, in that transparent world and that authenticity, the company has actually got to have a higher purpose as well. And actually, the way that consumers will make decisions about brands, not just about what that brand delivers, what the value it delivers, it's what are the values and what is the purpose of the company that makes them. And that's very open to everyone now.
And we could continue this conversation all day, but we are going to squeeze in a couple of quick questions before we let you all go.
Hi, thank you all. My name is Beth Temple, and I think the one thing that hasn't been talked about a lot is the actual marketing of media. So Eric talked about like kind of the vast amount of content. Ariana talked about the kind of attention deficit. So I'd like to know what your view is on how media brands are actually trying to, get the consumer and what they're using and how they're using it.
Well, one of the ways that we're using constantly is inviting the readers, inviting the viewers to participate. And I'm going to do this right now. I want to invite you all to write on the Huffington Post. We have 70 sections, so whatever it is that you're interested in, a book you've read can go in the book section. If you're going through a divorce and want to share it with us, it can go in the divorce section. If you're getting married, it can go in the wedding section, etc., etc. And then our editors pick the best to go on the homepage as well. So to make it super easy for you, here is my email address, ariana@huffingtonpost.com. So you just send it to me, and I'll expedite the process. So for me, it's a constant invitation.
And I'd like everyone to buy the next Call of Duty game, please.
Yeah, but you know what? You have to pay him. You don't have to pay me. That's the difference. So what are you going to do first, right? First, you come and write on the Huffington Post, and then if you're feeling flush, you buy the game, and then you come back to the Huffington Post to write about it.
But they are paying you. They're providing the content that you charge for.
Well, they're providing some of the content. The majority of the content is still being written by editors and journalists and comment moderators who will moderate the comments on your blogs, which is also incredibly important, so you can be assured of a civil environment. All our comments are pre-moderated. So basically, we are eliminating the worst aspects of the internet, trolls, ad hominem attacks. That is also going to be key, and more important part of the future as the internet is growing up. We're about to reach, in a week, 200 million comments, which shows how engaged the community is, and I bet you would never have reached that milestone if our comments were not pre-moderated, if it was a free-for-all.
Yeah, so to add to it, the way we're lucky to have some very trusted brands. The Weather Channel is probably the most trusted brand by a lot of metrics. Partially because it's not controversial. The thing that's been important to building our brand is to really know the audience. And I think media brands have to know who their users are, and the users change over time. On television, we're the #1 cable brand between 4 and 6 a.m. That's a very specific audience. Those are hardworking people who get up in square states in the middle of the country and go to work outdoors, and they need to know it. And it's a different audience from 6 to 9, and it's a different audience in prime, and I think, and then weather.com has a different phenomenon and mobile has a different phenomenon. You've got to really know your audience. You got to speak to them in their language and let them speak to you. Because I think media is, no matter how you're doing it, becoming more owned by the audience. For us, the way we've been driving ratings is to know that audience really, really well and give them what they need at that point in time.
I think one thing is that the new media companies have actually marketed themselves very well, but in a very different way, and I think that is a reflection of the different kind of media that it is. And if you actually think about it, it's the perfect marketing is Google, Twitter, Facebook have become verbs, and they're part of the culture, and that's the best marketing possible.
A new question on the left. Hi everyone, Neil Shapiro from Shazam. Also a verb now. Thank you very much for your support. And also, I used to work at Huffington Post for about 3 years. Hello, Ariana. Good to see you again.
You can come back.
So thinking about the future of media, and this question is for Eric, and then also Nigel and Miles in terms of the agency folks involved here. So if you think about media, we've been talking a lot about media in terms of advertising and TV and the internet and things like that. But for Eric, media for you also means $60 discs, right? I personally am going to go out and buy Call of Duty 2, very excited about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But if you look at what happened in the music business, where I also used to work, and then the movie business, and what happens with physical sales of physical media is going away and sort of being atomized. Now I can buy a song. You're starting to see it in the gaming world in terms of I buy a disc and then 3 months later some downloadable content comes out. So how are you at Activision, and then how are the agency guys sort of preparing their clients for a future where physical media is less and less of the equation, and everything sort of becomes digitized?
I think the key is, I hate to be kind of a broken record with my themes here, but the key is quality content. The key is having a product that you are confident in that is worth asking people to pay for. And what happened in the music business was nobody saw Napster coming, and suddenly everyone had access to all music everywhere for free. And there's still kind of like, I don't know what the age group is, but it seems to me there's an age group of about 5 to 7 years somewhere of people on Earth who just do not think they should have to pay for music ever. And the music industry then had to go reconstruct the value proposition and retrain people to pay for it. I think a very similar thing happened to journalism, to news media. And we used to be entrained and willing to pay for it, to pay for the newspaper, to pay for the content to get that we wanted to get and consume. And what's happened with a lot of industries is that as it's gone digital, someone somewhere decided that it should become free or less expensive. And I think that the key is doubling down on the quality of the content so that you are creating the must-have interactive entertainment experience that people are still willing to pay for no matter how the delivery mechanism changes.
Well, also the media brand needs to decide what is going to be its monetization model. I mean, the New York Times set up paywalls. They're making a lot of money from them, but their unique visitors are down 17% over the last year, which allowed ours to be up 19%, partly because there's left more room for brands like ours, which are entirely free. So you have to pick your model.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're absolutely preparing our clients for a world I mean, we actually don't even really think of it as digital anymore, because in many respects, everything is. And it is about convergence and how everything works together. And I think that for clients, they don't care whether it's analog, digital, whatever. It's does it work? You'll be very pleased. I was doing a talk with Trish Mueller of the Home Depot yesterday, and we actually plugged Shazam because it's a great pleasure. But it was because Shazam, and it wasn't about Shazam. It's the utility of Shazam actually enabled some great content to become more valuable to the consumer, and actually much more valuable to the Home Depot, because it enabled the consumer to act on that content and actually give them more value in terms of how they actually use that product, but actually enabled the Home Depot to then drive more sales. And that fundamentally is what's going to happen, and that will be the value of the different media.
We have time. I'm sorry, Miles. We have time for one more audience question. But
So
go right ahead, Miles.
Okay, so I think, just to reiterate what Nigel said, clients we don't have to predispose them to anything other than an expectation of results. So they don't care how we get there. They just want to know how we get that we will get there. I think the most important thing, though, is how do you define utility? How do you define that something is working? And if it's not time-bound and measurable, it's not an objective. So the most important thing is to take this qualitative dialogue and make it a very objective dialogue, where you could say, yes, it's working, here were the criteria we set, and here's how we measure the impact. And it's very apparent to a client it's either working well, exceedingly well, reasonably well, or not at all. And I think in that regard, that the definition of utility will become even more important going forward.
Can I just jump in from a brand perspective on that? So utility is important, but there is positive association by being involved with media that's got some cachet. So Ariana's done a great job of creating cachet for Huffington Post. So if there is a reference point that said, I saw this on Huffington Post, or this happened, that is a good thing. If you're involved with, big sporting events and other things, there is something, utility is important, but there is a positive or negative effect on the brand in terms of where they're seen and where they're positioned. And that conversation doesn't always happen in the quantitative side of media, but 4 to 6 o'clock in the morning, you should be on the Weather Channel because that's the trusted source at that point in time, and that's very valuable. So I think that piece has got to be part of the conversation always from a brand standpoint.
Oh, guys, I'm just going to try to slip in that one final quick audience question. Thanks.
Hi, thank you. My name is Julia Lavallo, and I'm the creative manager at the Clinton Global Initiative. And we're always thinking about how we're going to be doing good. And this question is for Ariana or David, and it's going on to what you said, that doing something for good is going to be a trend going forward. And my question is, why do you feel that way? And also, how do you see the acknowledgement of social good being used in marketing and media mix?
Well, we have incredible data about how more and more people, especially your generation, are engaged in wanting to do something good. We have 19,000 Ivy League graduates, for example, on the waiting list of Teach for America, just for the privilege of going to an inner city school, being paid minimum wage to teach at-risk kids. This is just one example. And also, to your point, I think a brand that is identified with also doing something good has a huge halo effect, whether a media company or any kind of brand. I mean, we launched at the Clinton Global Initiative a new section sponsored by Cisco called Impact X, about using technology to do good in the world. This is our 4th impact section. And we are finding our readers really respond. They really write to us about what they are doing to make the world better. We have an entire section called the Good News section, which every brand wants to sponsor because everybody wants to be identified with good news. And the worse the economy gets, the more people want to get a sense of optimism and hope by being around good news. So I feel, again, this is just the beginning of where we are going to be going. There is right now in San Francisco a big conference of social impact investing, where you have private equity and venture capitalists trying to combine good investing with doing good, bringing together markets and morals. So it's, again, where the future is going, and if we can be there ahead of the time, it's a huge advantage.
I would just add to that and say, I think two of the themes that we've talked about right now over the last little while in this panel about engagement and empowerment of people. I mean, it starts with, I think, people want to do good, people want to contribute and find ways, and often it's been restrictive or hard or people are busy. And so we're seeing a lot of the same way people, what works on Facebook and in general and in new media is a lot of lightweight, quick things. One of the things that is an example of doing this effectively is a couple of years ago, JP Morgan Chase, which I think gives away roughly $100 million in philanthropic activity money each year, said, well, why don't we take $5 million of that and we'll let people on Facebook nominate nonprofits that they want to support, and then we'll let people vote on that. And they got such huge engagement, millions of people coming on and voting, and they've upped it to $10 million, and they continue each year to ratchet that up. And it has benefits. It's empowering people to help direct their activities, and it's also, frankly, good for them. It's wrapping up their brand and around people, around some of the stuff that they're doing. And so we just think that there's more and more of these type of activities, but by putting in empowering people, enabling them to participate and contribute.
One of the things I'd encourage you to think about with CGI is making it accessible. I've been on the board of Teach for America for 16 years. It kills me that we have to turn so many away because we can't bring them all into that core. Conversely, one of the things that's been a great joy on the Weather Channel is the partnership we did this year with the American Red Cross. So that the Red Cross put their preparedness content onto our site so that people could be prepared for storms. We always, in a storm, have a Red Cross person before, during, and after. During, we put the shelters on the map so you know where to go. And after, it becomes the place they tell people how to help. Millions of people want to help. And some people help by donating money. Some people help by showing up. Some people help by writing notes. Some people help in other ways. Folks get great joy from helping others. I think part of the challenge is to make it easier, but one of the great things we can do in media, particularly when we combine broadcast with social, is make it easy for people. And I think all people want a little bit of joy from helping, and making sure that you can do that in a way that opens up to every individual is great. We've seen great results this year from it.
I'll tell you, from our organization, we have 14,000 people. We use corporate social responsibility as a key, unique selling proposition for the obtaining and retaining of talent. We allow people and encourage them to give time, talent, and treasure and we probably give more dollars per dollar of revenue of any organization or industry, because we believe that the kind of people who are brilliant creative people, they really are passionate to make a difference in the world. And we have this motto sort of that says 100 years from now, no one will ever remember the car you drove or the house you lived in, or for that matter, how much money you had in your bank account, but the world may be a different place if you've made a difference in the life of a young person. You can't believe the amount of time, talent, and treasure people are prepared to devote within the organization to support these initiatives. And by matching that kind of initiative, it's been a huge motivator to get great people, and it is an incredible distinguishing characteristic in relation to other organizations. And it's, I think, a value system that's been really helpful to us. And so I think it only grows over time.
So I think we have to leave it there because I know we've run over, but I think it's a perfect note to end on. And I want to thank all of our panelists and thank you all for joining us today.
Julia and the entire esteemed panel, on behalf of MediaPost and NYU, we appreciate your devotion to this effort. And if some of you could stay behind and meet some of the students out here, some of you panelists, we'd really appreciate it. There's a reception at the back of the hall.